Are you surprised by the evidence that's already coming out in the criminal trial?
No, I'm not surprised. I experienced some of those things. Witnessed violence.
Picture this. We squeeze into that marble-walled courtroom, shoulder to shoulder with reporters, jurors fidgeting under buzzing lights. Then the temperature shifts in an instant. 1 second, Sean Diddy Combs is whispering with counsel. Next, we see him bolt upright, eyes locked on Cassie's suited advocate across the aisle. Tears screech, papers flutter in, then it happens. He surges forward like a linebacker at kickoff. We swear we hear the pop of knuckles before we even register the blur of movement. A stunned gasp ripples through the gallery as Diddy's fist arcs straight into the lawyer's jaw, snapping the poor man's glasses clean off. The crack echoes, the gavel bangs, and for a heartbeat, the entire chamber is frozen, mouths open. Breathing suspended while the judge's face turns the color of a warning flare.
And, it brings into context our whole system of innocent until proven guilty. Why is he not being given bond? We can debate that all day long. Of all people that's unlikely to flee or get away, well, he's got the resources to flee, but he's so recognizable. And isn't he innocent until proven guilty? Well, yeah, but, we have to recognize there are degrees of innocent until proven guilty.
Before security can scramble, Diddy's already hauling. The stunned attorney by the lapels, hurling accusations about betrayal and pay-for-play testimonies. We can practically feel his breath with each guttural shout. A deputy lunges, but Diddy jukes left. And in that microsecond, a second jab, lands a jab so quick we almost wonder if we dreamed it. Until the lawyer's knees give out and he collapses, papers scattering like confetti at the world's most disastrous parade. The court reporter drops. Her stereotyped jurors flinch as Spittalore. Is it blood? Dots the polished floor. The judge slams the gavel once, twice, a third time, roaring for order. But the courtroom has already entered a nightmare loop, every shout ricocheting against marble.
It's a legitimate concern. No judge wants to wake up and read the headlines the next day. Oh, they treated this guy special and they gave him bond, and now he's gone and he fled from justice. So that's what's in the back of most judges' minds. On the other hand, we deal with cases where clients have significant funds sometimes. Sometimes where there's money, you can craft a unique solution. Years ago it was the ankle bracelet and the ankle monitor.
Asterisk, we watch the bailiffs finally swarm, wrestling Diddy away while he thrashes like a man possessed. His cufflinks glint under the fluorescent lights, his silk tie now pulled halfway over one shoulder, dangling like a defeated flag. Somewhere behind us, a spectator sobs. Somewhere else, a phone clicks furtively, hoping to snatch the viral shot that will set social feeds ablaze. The judge, her robe fluttering, storms down from the bench, jaw clenched so tight, her words escape. Through grinding teeth, we can't repeat exactly what she mutters, but it's the kind of language that suggests career-ending contempt citations are about to land like hailstones. Only after Diddy is finally pinned against the paneled wall, wrists restrained, do we hear the wounded attorney, groan-dazed eyes blinking behind crooked frames. Paramedics materialize like stagehands after a stunt gone wrong. But the real drama is unfolding in the judge's chambers, audible even through heavy oak doors. We catch snippets of contempt, revocation, public menace, 20 minutes of exercise, and suddenly, the smart money in the press row shifts from a calculated plea bargain to the possibility of a much longer sentence. The prosecution looks vindicated. Defense counsel looks shell-shocked, and jurors stare at their shoes, as if hoping the floor tiles might transport them anywhere but here.
Maybe some solution where his money could help us craft. He could build a separate jail cell, and we could keep him there. Just interesting to me that they sort of said, nope, they're going to be treated not like everybody else, but a lot like everybody else. Having money doesn't do it. So I wouldn't want to be those judges. There's sort of a no-win situation.
The fallout is immediate and radioactive. Legal analysts outside sprint for cameras, spitting out hot takes about unbridled aggression and fatal blows to credibility. One veteran commentator huffs that such an outburst could trigger an obstruction enhancement, maybe even nudge sentencing guidelines from years to decades. Another hints darkly that the judge's fury might eclipse any sympathy Diddy's racial bias argument once commanded. And yes, Diddy's team have been leaning hard on that card. No white person has ever been the target of a remotely similar prosecution. They argued in last week's filing, but we wondered, does that line still carry? Punch after a headline-making courtroom because let's be honest, this feels less like a momentary lapse and more like a mob flick come alive. Was Diddy simply cracking under pressure, or was he sending a louder-than-word signal? We've already heard whispers that Cassie's counsel had been catching veiled warnings for weeks, anonymous calls, shadowy figures parked near his townhouse. Late-night envelopes holding nothing but blank USB sticks. Paranoid fantasy? Maybe. Yet every rumor finds new legs now that the man at the center of them has literally thrown his own.
They're going to try everything. They're going to try to transfer him. They're going to try to get him out. You know, in a normal case where it's a high-profile person or a well-funded person, the prosecution and the judge is a little bit more concerned about wrongful prosecution because people that are mad that they're being arrested for a crime they didn't commit can turn around and file for malicious prosecution.
Dig a little deeper, and the whispers grow darker. One source who will only call himself Midnight J, a studio runner with access. 2 more mixing boards than Morals claims someone in Diddy's orbit floated. Hush money offers north of 7 figures to key witnesses. Another insider swears the same attorney who hit the floor had already reported attempted cyber intrusions, someone prying into cloud backups for confidential case notes. And let's not ignore those hints about quiet intimidation tactics. Anonymous? Bouquets showing up at witnesses' doors with single black lilimanas enough to chill anyone's spine. We'd think all of that was wild conspiracy if not for the timing of Diddy's eruption. Just 1 hour before fists flew, prosecutors filed a sealed motion, rumored to involve surveillance footage of private marathons with hired night companions. Footage Diddy allegedly kept on encrypted drives. The rumor mill insists those drives contain more than just grainy hotel suite snapshots. We're talking full-blown multi-camera productions that could make even hardened jurors squirm. Word is, the tech expert who cracked the encryption was preparing to testify under Cassie's lawyer's direct questioning. And if that's true, it means the man Diddy punched was about to unveil the exact evidence that could collapse any notion of consensual playdates. Meanwhile, behind bulletproof glass and steel bars, Diddy's defense line keeps mute. One day, they argue racial targeting under the Dusty Mon Act. Next, they pivot to claims of jealous ex-lovers chasing paydays. After today's melee, commentators compare the strategy to juggling flaming torches during a windstorm. And still, through all that spin, we find ourselves replaying a 2-word text buried in thousands of exhibits. Girl, stop. He fired it off when one ex tried to quit the late-night carousel. It's a short phrase, almost casual. But after watching him crack a lawyer's jaw, it resonates like a warning.
I think that even if we don't know our parents, we still have their DNA in us. You know, we have their genes. And I have his hustler's mentality, his hustler spirit, his drive, his determination, you know, his swag.
We can't overlook the judge's blistering private rebuke either. Sources slip out of chambers pale-faced, describing language fit for a sailor tour. A contempt hearing looms, and the bail pending appeal looks like vapor. Even Diddy's own bodyguards are whispering about Plan B, with one telling us off the record that this spiral makes the 2001 club shootout look like ping pong. We're not sure that qualifies as comfort. Yet the rabbit hole stretches further. Federal investigators are rumbling about confiscated studio hard drives labeled simply summer mixes though. Insiders swear they're anything but music. Imagine hours of lavish soirees where no phone cameras were allowed. Yet overhead dome cams kept rolling under Diddy's explicit orders. Why would a man famous for controlling his brand archive such compromising footage? Vanity? Insurance? Blackmail? We don't know. But we hear prosecutors are connecting names, timestamps, and money transfers in a digital lattice that points straight to racketeering. If these so-called secret tapes jump from rumor to evidence, the courtroom brawl could look like a slap on the wrist compared to the legal supernova coming. Still, let's not miss the personal stakes. Cassie, who once serenaded crowds with buttery vocals, now sits in protective anonymity, escorted by U.S. Marshals after dusk. The intimidation she described, black SUVs idling outside her mother's condo, unknown numbers texting midnight threats, suddenly reads less like paranoia, and more like a dress rehearsal for today's violence. And as we watch Diddy's polished image fray thread by thread, we have to ask, is the empire finally cracking under its own weight? Or are we witnessing the desperate tactics of a mogul who feels the walls closing in?
Diddy will be sued, and I say will be because nothing has been filed yet, by at least 120 people in the next 30 days. So
Spectacle isn't confined to 4 courtroom walls. Streaming platforms debate pulling his catalog. Sponsors freeze partnerships. And even rival artists, some who once circled his orbit like moths to a gold-plated flame start, scrubbing old collabs from playlists. But the biggest ripple, the FBI Cyber Forensics Division is now poking through offshore servers after a midnight warrant. Rumor says they're hunting for backups of those very tapes plus transactional ledgers tied to hush agreements disguised as Consulting retainers. One agent may be loose-lipped, maybe strategic motors to a reporter. You don't pay seven-figure consulting fees to someone whose only expertise is silence. Chilling, right? And through it all, we can't shake the mental freeze frame of that first punch, an image so raw, so unfiltered, it captures the combustible cocktail of fame, fear, and ego better than 1,000 witness statements. It tells us this saga is no longer about distant allegations. It's about live-wire volatility, the kind that can erupt anywhere, under oath, under cameras, under the judge's stern glare. It hints that the courtroom violence might be just a spark compared to the wildfire, fanned by those mysterious recordings and the whispered threats behind them. So we linger on that cliff's edge, hearts thumping, ears ringing with the judge's gavel and the attorney's pained groan, knowing the storm has only just begun. But before we can even let that freeze frame settle, a far bigger tremor rumbles. Through the gossip underground, here's the whispered headline circulating in velvet rope circles. A hidden chamber, a so-called panic room, buried deep inside one of Diddy's skyscraper mansions.
What does that tell you? I would have thought Diddy would be throwing all his celebrity mates under the bus.
I mean, that could potentially be coming when it's time for court and when it's time for him to testify. But what we're seeing right now is how important public relations really are to Sean Combs. He's desperately trying to control the narrative behind bars, allowing his attorneys to do